Welcome back everyone to Gotcha Interact. Today we're going to be talking about the second half of the 5.5 banners today. First we're going to be taking a look at Xilonen with her rerun, and then also looking at Venti, the Animal Archon, looking at his rerun as well. Taking a look at both of these characters and see whether or not they are a good pulling option for you. So now let's jump right into the video. So the first character we did want to talk about is going to be Xilonen. So looking at Xilonen, obviously a very well-known character with a very good kit that a lot of people have been very highly focusing on and getting and putting in a lot of different teams. And there's a very big reason for it. Using her skill, she can go into her Knight's Blessing state. At that point, you're going to do some basic attacks or some normal attacks, which is then going to fill her Knight's gauge up or her Knight's points after each normal attack. Once you get to the maximum limit, you're basically going to get to a point where you can then get a buff on an or debuff on an enemy, which is going to bring the elemental resistance down of the enemies with any type of the elements that are in the team. So she kind of has these like source samples on the side of her based on the amount of elements or the types of elements that are in the team. Basically with her, you want to have like other pyro, hydro, cryo, or electro characters in the team so that she can obviously help resist or bring down that elemental resistance of those enemies. So that's kind of exactly how specifically usually her skill works. You're basically just trying to have other swirlable, what we usually call them, elements or the core 4 really in her team, just to make sure that she can bring down the resistances of those enemies. Now also, if you have any of the characters like Geo, Dendro, or Anemo, those little shards are going to stay as the Geo sample, and that actually does also decrease the Geo resistance of other enemies, which could help some other Geo characters, but also could help Xilonen with her own personal damage. But usually you're not going to see that. Usually you're going to see her as a support. Also keep in mind, you do need a certain amount of these to be going at one time, so you can't just have a full Geo roster, or else this elemental resistance shred is not going to occur. So keep that in mind as you are using that skill. Also her burst, though, considering she is an extremely good support using that kind of resistance shred in her kit, she also has an extremely good amount of healing and a continuous amount of that in her burst. Using her burst, she's going to basically have, as long as she has at least 2 of those source samples that have had their elemental types changed, so they're all going to start out as Geo, the 3, and then if at least 2 of them have changed, Xilonen's going to play like a certain rhythm, which is going to heal nearby characters. If you have no other, if like none of them have changed, or only 1 or 0 of them have changed, then you're actually only going to change that into a damage phase, where she's going to do basically like 2 or 3 hits, I think, of just some extra follow-up damage, which is really not that great. Once again, the whole reason of her kind of being in this state is really to make sure she's an extremely good healer, as well as a really good elemental resistance shred character. So having at least 2 other characters in the team that are one of the core 4 is going to help give her the elemental resistance shred, as well as giving her the healing that's going to be necessary for her kit.
Varessa is just around the corner, but arguably more exciting than even that are the upcoming characters Effie and Skirk. And what better way to help stock up those Primogem savings than to use Lootbar? Lootbar is an online platform that allows you to top up your Genshin Impact account at a cheaper rate than what's provided in-game. The best news about this is that only your UID and your server region are required when making a purchase. You don't have to use any emails, any passwords, or anything like that. Lootbar guarantees your delivery in just 30 minutes or less, but every time I've used it, I always get it within 60 seconds. If you do encounter any problems, they do have a 24/7 live chat support. You can see right here in the bottom right. If you're still unsure of whether or not Lootbar is safe or reliable, they have over 35,000 positive reviews that you can look at yourself on their own website, and also Trustpilot if you want to look in other sources. Don't take it from just us. There have been other creators that have used Lootbar in the past, such as Jello Impact, Mujin, Tevat Times. Also, if you do play other games, you can check out their homepage, and you can see here that they support Honkai Star Rail, Zenless Zone Zero, Wuthering Waves, and many more games. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead and check out that link in our description and our pinned comment to check out Lootbar for yourself and save some money on those top-ups. And now quickly looking at Venti, who is a very old character, one of the very first characters that ever came out in the game. So a lot of people are going to be looking at this as, not a very great character to go after, especially, being on a banner with Xilonen. But let's actually, for those of you who don't already know what he does, quickly looking at what he brings to the table. His skill is just going to do a little bit of anemo damage, nothing crazy. You can also hold his skill, though, to do, once again, just some AoE anemo damage. But this time when he does that, he'll actually create a kind of wind domain looking thing where he'll actually create a gust of wind, and you can actually, go in that and glide with any character inside of that. So it does allow for some exploration, ease of use if there's some hard to get to places, if you don't already have other characters that can do that sort of thing. Characters, a lot of the Natlan cast actually has a lot of, very good exploration thing. So if you don't have something like that, can be something that just is kind of nice to have. But the ultimate thing there is it's just a little bit of animo damage, and the reason that's going to be a big deal for him is because he's really just, in the end, a Viridescent Venerer animo support, so you can get out some buffs that way. But then looking at his burst, this is probably the most interesting and cool part of his kit. Has a lot of good animo damage, personal damage for him, and then it also can infuse with any of the core 4 elements, being Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, and Electro. It can infuse one of those elements, and also just once again as an animo support, if he's using something like Viridescent, gets that swirl off and is now, giving that big damage buff to one of those core 4 elements. So really, all in all, that's all he kind of brings to the table. He does have some energy restoration that he's doing, so that can be something to mention. He does regenerate energy for himself, but also for the element that he does absorb with his burst, he's restoring 15 energy to the characters of the same element. So that is kind of nice, you could say.
So the next thing we want to take a look at is obviously our question section. Really looking at the summary now that we've looked at both characters. Now we want to ask some questions. So the first thing we want to ask is, do you actually need either character in your account? How valuable is each character? So first, obviously looking at Xilonen. Xilonen is one of, if not the best support in the game right now. I mean, especially when we're talking about the core 4, we're talking about Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Electro. We're looking at some of the best teams that you're looking at are going to involve her. And any single character that really uses those, unless they're a physical character like Eula or Razor, they're going to be very, very ecstatic using her and getting a lot of those buffs. Now, usually in the past, we've used characters like Kazuha, who gives an elemental damage bonus in his kit, and then gives the Viridescent Shred in his artifact set. Xilonen kind of flips that script. She actually has the ability to give the elemental resistance shred in her kit, and then with the set of the Scroll of the Hero of Cinder City, which she works exceptionally well with, she can also give the elemental damage bonus as well, as long as she comes into a reaction with it. So that's something to keep in mind with a lot of the teams that you're going to be using. That's usually what she's going to be used for. Also, she does exceptionally well as a healer, so even if your team is not necessarily focusing so much on having a lot of that buff, it doesn't necessarily need it just because of the raw strength and power, she's still an exceptional healer. So really, Xilonen is just one of those characters you can never go wrong with pulling. There's a few characters like that in the game, and honestly, with Xilonen being one of those, you can never go wrong with pulling Xilonen. She works on Geo teams, she works on non-Geo teams, obviously with those core 4. The only really teams that she probably doesn't work exceptionally well on are going to be those Animo, like Hydro, like Animo specific, fully, focused teams, like a Zhao team with like 3 Animo characters and a Hydro character, or we're going to be looking at like a full just Dendro team where it's just really focusing on like Hyper Bloom or something. Keep in mind, even something like a spread team, or a aggravate team, which is focusing on a lot of that electro damage, could still technically actually use her to a good effect. So keep that in mind as you are kind of using her and going after her. That kind of shows the value of Xilonen. You really can never go wrong. The other side of things is Venti. Now, Venti, as much as I know people want to collect Archons, that's really the only reason that people would be pulling after him at this point, or maybe you just weren't here during the time that he was actually out on his reruns. So he's the first Archon in the game. He's also one of the first characters that released as well. Venti's honestly just a really fun character, has a very lighthearted attitude, so that's why a lot of people will pull for him. In terms of value for an account, like Rift was talking about, he does have the ability to kind of suck enemies together into that one single area, and that does have the ability to just basically, especially if you have like a one big damage hit thing and you don't want to miss any enemies, that really does help and make sure that you're hitting them. Characters that don't like to move around a lot, or kind of specifically like to make sure characters stay together, a character like Ayato that I know Rift likes to use, would probably actually like to have characters stay in one place. Not that it's bad that they can't, but it's extremely helpful to have them stay in one place. So Venti kind of starts and ends with his burst and his supported capability using Viridescent Venerer. So between those two few things, he does have some good value. He's not a useless character, but because of the recent characters in the recent cast, there just are better supports to go after. Characters like Venti, and even somebody like Jean can still technically work. But Venti does show a lot of promise as just a good character still to this day. So Rift, I don't know, what do you think about the two characters? I know I've gone a lot in detail, but what do you think?
No, I would totally agree with everything you've said. I think overall, at this point, a lot of people kind of understand. And for those who are learning for the first time, definitely look at other content out there. People have good things to say, and you'll pick up very quickly that Xilonen is definitely considered a meta pull character. A lot of people are going to be going after her because this will be her first rerun. So the people that didn't get her, or even the people that already have her, she has some crazy constellations. C1, C2 definitely are very, very highly sought after constellations, very, very powerful. So as far as vertical investment goes, you know, I know a lot of people would talk about, well, you know, if you already have Kazuha, then you don't need Xilonen. And while that may be true, I, for one, actually am an example. I don't have Xilonen right now, but I've used Kazuha all of this time, and I've been doing the Abyss just fine. So that is to say, you can do the content without her, but she still is the best option, especially if you're looking at constellations, because the C1 and C2 Kazuha has kind of started to fall off. C1 Kazuha is more of an energy kind of fix, just giving him another use of the skill after the burst. The C2 still has some value, giving you the EM, especially, you know, that's going to be still good for if you are doing like Melt Mawika stuff, any other reaction-based things, that still obviously is going to help. But you just can't beat the C1 and especially C2 Xilonen. Those buffs on C2 Xilonen are absolutely just crazy and are going to outdo the Kazuha any day of the week. So I think with that being said, that's why, you know, Xilonen is definitely going to be above Kazuha by a long shot. Even at C0 though, she still is going to be better for most of the teams in the game. And then obviously Venti being on kind of the opposite end of that stick, like you said, you know, we've got Xilonen, literally the top end of the support spectrum if you want. And then Venti's probably very, very close to the bottom, because Kazuha would probably be in the middle, nearer to the Xilonen side, with then pretty much all of your other Animo characters in between, just because of the use with Viridescent Venerer, right? And so at this point in the game, you know, characters like Lynette were given out for free with 4.0. You know, Sucrose you'll get at some point, probably. You know, Jean was, you know, if you did pick on the free standard selector, she was an option, and we'll be getting that probably, you know, by the end of the year again. So you should already have some Animo character on your account, whoever it is, to be able to use Viridescent, which means Venti just doesn't have as much pull value, because that's really all you'd be using him for anyways. His personal damage isn't anything to, you know, sneeze at. So I think everything you've said, Vixen, is absolutely like perfect, and so I would totally agree with. So, and that would lead into our next question: what kinds of teams are you trying to build? And this is going to be an interesting one to cover, considering these two characters fill a very similar role. You know, Xilonen and Venti, and then any character like that, you know, what's the main question that people think of? Well, if I don't have Xilonen, who is the substitute? It's usually Kazuha, and if you don't have that, then that turns into really any other Animo character, which includes Venti here. So when it comes to teams, a lot of them are going to look very, very similar, because any team Xilonen is, like Vixen's already covered, obviously your main 4 core elements. There are some Geo teams you can do, because she does, you know, actually decrease Geo resistance as well. So I know there's teams you can do there for like double Geo with Chiori. It's pretty fun. Ito as a main DPS, of course. There's some things you can do there. And with Venti, it's going to be very similar, just minus the Geo thing. You're just, well, Viridescent Venerer support. So any team that is the core 4. So while they have very similar team build-up, I think with specific teams, obviously for Xilonen, that's going to, you know, bring to question Mawika. So while Mawika is going to be the top DPS in the game right now, and obviously one of her favorite teammates is Xilonen, so, you know, if that's something you're wanting to go after, then hey, there you go, because that's going to be a goated team. Usually the best team for Mawika is something like Bennett, Xilonen, and Sitlali, or something like that, with a few variants, of course. But keep in mind that, you know, Mawika's powerful enough, if you do have her, that you don't absolutely need Xilonen. She's, you know, Mawika's just insane and can clear the content without all the, you know, top tier buffs. She's just a top tier DPS. But if that's what you want to go for, then go for it. And then on the other side of the coin, Venti, like I've kind of been saying, you can kind of see already how, like, if you don't have Xilonen, it's okay. You don't need Venti for it. You don't even need Kazuha for it. They just fill a very similar role. So, Vixen, I don't know, what are some of your specific thoughts when it comes to teams with these characters? Maybe you can share some more specific scenarios.
Well, with Xilonen, keep in mind, if you want to get that resistance shred, you have to, or especially the healing, you have to have at least 2 of the core 4 in the team. That's the only way that that's actually going to be allowed. So even the Geo resistance shred with like an Ito team, a lot of people are going to be throwing like Goro in there and having 3 Geo at the very least.
Yeah.
You have to have at least 2 characters that are of the core 4 to make her resistance shred actually work.
Right.
The other thing to keep in mind is with her teams, usually you're going to see characters, I know a character you didn't bring up that I just thought of was like Navia, and that's just purely because I have her. Navia is extremely good with her. But yeah, no, everything you said was really, really good because honestly, that's just what you're focusing on. Make sure you have 2 of the core 4. Just make sure you're getting the resistance shred. Make sure you're reacting with her with the element or the main DPS so that that's happening and you're getting the elemental damage bonus buff. But honestly, with the teams that we're talking about here, something to keep in mind also is Natlan characters do exceptionally well. Now, I know that there are
Yes.
certain Natlan characters that work better than others. Obviously, Malwika's going to work exceptionally well because Xilonen can shred so much of her Night Soul points. That does help Malwika get like so much back for her burst. But there are plenty of other Natlan characters that work and probably ones in the future that will work. So just keep that in mind as you are thinking about that she does work for plenty of other characters as well. And honestly, also making sure that she's triggering that Night Soul burst. More Natlan characters means that the Night Soul burst is going to be happening more often because it's bringing down the cooldown. So that's something to keep in mind. Venti teams, I think that, like you said, it's just any one of the backups. So characters like Jean, Sucrose, or whatever that are backups to Kazuha and Xilonen, that's really where you're going to be throwing them anyways. So Xilonen can be on one side, Venti can be on the other. Technically, they can even be on the same half. Same thing with Kazuha. They can all be playing in the same team technically, or at least one Viridescent character and Xilonen can be playing together just for a really like hyper-built team. So that is, once again, something just to keep in mind. But overall, when we look at these 2 characters, that really shows their value. Now, the last thing we want to just quickly go over is we do not have anything over the 4 stars right now, so we can't necessarily talk about that. But really quickly going over their weapons, really looking at do you need the weapons. Personally, in my opinion, we have the defense percent weapon for Xilonen. Xilonen does all of her stuff based off of defense and even heals based off of it. Keep that in mind, that's really going to be helpful for you. I think that there are plenty of other options for her as a character to use. Favonius is even a really, really good option that a lot of people use just to make sure she can get her burst back more consistently for a lot of teams. And then just going pure defense percent on her artifacts, that's a great way to do things, but she does have plenty of options for weapons, so I really don't feel like her weapon is necessary. If you are going after constellations and everything, obviously try to get the weapon first, but I really do think that, you can kind of go either way. Basically, she gets some extra defense and elemental damage bonus if she does a normal or a plunge attack, and then also she gets increases all party members elemental damage bonus based on every 1,000 defense she has, and that kind of can max up to 25.6% at R1. So a very good amount of defense at 82.7% with her personal weapon. Very good song. Peep Patrol song is a pretty good weapon. Very good weapon, but I think that it's not really necessary to really go after. Elegy for the End, on the other hand, is also a very good weapon, but also something that I wouldn't really say is necessary to go after. Things like Viridescent Hunt to make him a little bit, Venti a little bit stronger when we talk about crit ratios. You could kind of go after something like that. That is a Battle Pass weapon, though, so I understand that free-to-plays that might be a little bit more difficult to go after. There are plenty of other energy recharge, just straight weapons that do exceptionally well as well that work well with him. I think he's got plenty of other options. I really don't feel like his weapon is necessary either. It's really what it comes down to when you look at supports. Their weapons don't really come as necessary, in my opinion, compared to when you look at DPS.
Yeah, when it comes to the weapons, I think it's a good weapon banner for Xilonen. Obviously, if you're getting Xilonen, maybe you already have her but don't have the weapon and you're going after it, getting Elegy is really not a bad pickup because
No.
everyone knows as far as the bow archetype goes, Elegy is one of the only good support bows, if that kind of makes sense, to just use on any bow character as an off-fielder. I've seen people use Elegy on Yelan a lot for a lot of teams that will involve just, hey, this is going to give my on-fielder just more damage because it's a good bow for buffing your actual other characters, so people have used it on even the 4 stars like Diona, etc., whatever. And the energy is going to help, especially like a character like Yelan that I just mentioned. So it's overall not a terrible weapon banner. We've definitely seen worse. We have seen better though, but if you do get Elegy, don't feel like that's a major loss. It's honestly, if you don't already have it, I think that that could be an okay pickup. I think looking at the entire banner, I guess going back to the characters more or less. Overall, in my personal opinion, and then maybe Vixen, you could build off of this to give your overall just, cut to the chase opinion. If you don't have Xilonen, I don't think you can go around going after her. Obviously, one of the best supports in the game. If you already have something like Kazuha, though, and you are scrounging for Prima Gems, maybe you want to get Skirk, maybe you want to get Escoffier for your Skirk, or just want to look towards, Sneznaya or something like that, you can get away with not getting Xilonen, and I feel like I'm testament to that because I have been clearing content without her. I don't have Xilonen. That being said, I have many other characters, and honestly, I can't let the, maybe not bias is not what I'm looking for, but the idea that I have a lot of other powerful characters and just well-built teams that are just well-rounded anyway, so maybe that's why I'm getting away with it. My main point is, You can get away with Xilonen if you have some good substitutes, like Kazuha, like maybe you already have another Viridescent Venerer Animo support, even if it is a 4-star like Sucrose or any of the others. As long as your teams are well-rounded and you are, getting the buffs you need for your characters, speaking about your DPSs here, if you're lacking on DPSs on your account, and that's what you just really need, like you literally only have like 1 or 2, then maybe that's what you should be saving for. Maybe, looking at Skirk here, right? Maybe that would be more valuable for you. It really comes down to your account. Overall, though, anyone will tell you that Xilonen's really not a bad pickup. It just, what do you want and what do you need for your account? Venti, I think it's safe to say stay away from, especially with Xilonen just being right here as the other option. And it's just like, if you're going to spend anything or just going to spend any Prima Gems that you've been saving, you might as well do it on the Xilonen side.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to put it. Honestly, in a shortcut way of saying it, go after Xilonen. That's really the best way to talk about
Xilonen
it.
or safe?
Basically, because I mean, you said it perfectly. Once again, all of those like specific Night Soul Burst teams, all those Night Soul characters, she's just going to be better for. Obviously, that's going to be helpful for them, triggering Night Soul Burst for herself and the other characters. It's going to be way better. You have to keep in mind, yes, we have characters like Kazuha. Honestly, she's more or less an actual character, more like Jean, where you have the ability to have the buffing like Kazuha, but you're a healer. So you have the Viridescent, plus you have everything else that comes with a character like Jean. So I just really think that that's just amazing and honestly really, really good because of the heals that you get. She is such a well-rounded support. It's really not somebody that you really can turn your back to. Like Riff said though, if you have so many other characters that are supports, if you've got like Farina, Shan Yun, you've built all these other characters, or if your account doesn't make any sense for it, Xilonen is just a character you can skip. She's not a character that you have to get. So if you are at the point where you have characters, if you have a good enough roster, it doesn't make sense for you to pull, don't go after it just because everybody's telling you that she's the best character since creation. So that's really something to just keep in mind.
And I know that there would be people that'd be upset over hearing that. Like, what are you telling people not to go for Xilonen? You should go for Xilonen. But like, look, it does depend on your account. It really, really does. Like Vixen has Xilonen. Actually, you have the C2, in fact, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and then I don't at all. I use Kazuha every single Abyss since Natlan's release. That's just, he's one of my best options, and because I didn't get Xilonen,
and there's been no
that's
problems.
what I gotta use. Yeah.
But that's the thing though. We want to be very transparent. My account is a little bit more vertically invested, what we call it, when I have my characters have their weapons, have constellations. That's just what my account looks like. I don't have as many characters, but I've been playing for 4 years as well, so I have a lot more characters than probably some people, but at the same time, if my account is just vertically invested, Rift on the other hand grabs as many characters as he physically can, builds all of them, and also at the same time make sure that every single one of his 5 stars has their best in slot weapon. So that's also something to keep in mind as well, is that he's got a much better horizontally better account, but it's also extremely stacked.
I'm a Siege Wing player. I'm a Chiori player, okay? I know what it's like to not have meta, but I've consistently 36 starts, so don't let those people
And he's also gone to the point
into
where he's got Yelan, Farina, Sijuin in the team and also gone through that in the Abyss. So there's just ways where you can play around things when you understand the game. So if you're at the point where you're like, okay, well, he's doing it, then I can too. Well, if you look at your account and you don't have any supports, then you really do need Xilonen. Like Rich was talking about, you have plenty of backups that actually do work for you, and you've got them extremely well built, and some even have their weapons if they're 5 stars. So that is also something to keep in mind, really looking at what does your account actually need. This is a very supportive banner. In my personal opinion, I think they threw Xilonen in a great time. It's kind of in a middle patch area, so if you're going for another DPS, you have some time before Skirk really arrives, so yes, you can pull Xilonen. But if you're really looking to get that great duo between a character, well, by the way, Xilonen would work great for her, but if you're really looking at a team specifically for like Escoffier and Skirk together to make like a mono, like Cryo and Hydro team, then Xilonen kind of gets pushed out of that team, and in that sense, if you're trying to go for Escoffier, Escoffier only wants Hydro and Cryo characters in the team, and at that point, then you need to be skipping Xilonen if that's really what you're going after to make your next team. So once again, there's so many different ways that this really can go. Ask us questions in the comments. We try to answer as much as we can, try to give you guys the best answers, try to be a little bit detailed in what you guys have, just because that helps us a little bit more kind of answer. But besides that, I think that's everything we've got talking about these banners in this video. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Check out our Discord as well. Once again, let us know if you have any other questions in the comments. This is actually a very interestingly well-placed banner just because of how good it is. It's extremely good for the characters, especially for the time period. It could be a great time to pick up Xilonen, but depending on what your team looks like or your account looks like, it could also be a very bad time. So let us know down in the comments what you guys think. Are you guys pulling for Xilonen? Are you guys going after Venti? Are you guys doing the Pokemon of collecting the Archons? Go ahead and let us know. Thank you guys though once again for watching the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.